One summer's day, in a small house near the woods, there lived a little girl whose name was Goldilocks. Goldilocks, where are you? I'm in the garden, Mama. Well, don't go away. Your meal will be ready soon, and don't play in the woods. No, Mama. Goldilocks stood very still and looked around and realized she was lost. Nearby, in a tiny cottage in the woods, there lived a family of 3 bears. A daddy bear, a mommy bear, and a wee baby bear. Come along, said Mommy Bear. This porridge is far too hot. We'll take a little walk before breakfast. Goldilocks, seeing the balloon floating over the trees, started off down the path towards it. Very soon she came across the bear's cottage. Hello, is anyone at home? Said Goldilocks. Finding herself inside a strange house, she was a little frightened. She was also very hungry. She dipped into the big bowl of porridge, but it was far too hot. Then she tried the middle-sized bowl, but it was all gooey. But when she tried the baby bowl, it was just right, and she gobbled it all up. She felt much better now, and decided that nice people must live there, and they would surely show her the way home when they returned. She looked for somewhere to sit. The big daddy chair was too high. The middle-sized mummy chair was far too soft. Then she tried the baby chair. It was just right. She was so pleased she began to rock backwards and forwards until suddenly she looked at the broken chair and remembered the times her mummy had told her not to rock in her chair in case she fell. Well, now she had fallen and broken the chair. She looked out of the window to see if anyone was coming, but no one was in sight. Sadly, she turned away and climbed the stairs and found herself in a big bedroom. There was a big daddy bed, a middle-sized mummy bed, and a wee baby bed. Feeling sleepy, she tried to climb on the big daddy bed. It was very high and very hard. So she tried the middle-sized mummy bed, but it was too soft, and the cover was so slippery she slid off onto the floor. And then she lay on the baby bed, and it was just right. In fact, it was so comfortable she fell fast asleep. Meanwhile, the bears had returned from their walk. The big daddy bear peered into his bowl and said, "Who's been eating my porridge?" The middle-sized mummy bear said, "And someone's been eating my porridge." While the little bear cried, for someone had eaten all of his porridge, every bit. The big daddy bear went to his chair and said, "Someone's been sitting on my chair." "Now, someone has been sitting on my chair," said the middle-sized mummy bear. And the wee baby bear cried again and said, "Someone's been sitting on my chair and has broken off the legs." The bears were puzzled. They decided to look upstairs. The big daddy bear looked at his bed and said, "Someone's been lying on my bed." The middle-sized mummy bear said crossly, "Someone's been lying on my bed." While the wee baby bear cried out, "Someone's been sleeping on my bed, and there she is." Poor Goldilocks woke up suddenly. "Oh dear, she cried, and she was so frightened she jumped straight out of the window. She ran down the path and into the woods as fast as she could, and she didn't stop running until she saw her tiny teddy bear lying on the ground. Looking up, she saw her garden gate. Quickly, she ran inside, just in time to hear her mother calling, "Goldilocks, Goldilocks, where are you? So Goldilocks went inside and ate her lunch, which was just right, and never wandered into the woods again. There once lived a miller, much given to boasting about his daughter, a pretty but modest girl called Anna. He would say things like, "She can sing like a bird and dance like sunlight on the water." The miller's friends and neighbors listened to his boasting, and as they liked Anna, they merely smiled politely and said nothing. One day, however, unnoticed by the miller, a stranger listened to his stories and heard him say, "Why, my daughter spins so fine she could into gold." The stranger, who was a messenger from the palace, left hurriedly to report this extraordinary news to the king. Naturally, the king was intrigued and summoned Anna to attend the court. The coach was sent to fetch her, and the miller was prouder than ever to think that his daughter should be so honored. But Anna was sad at leaving home. On arrival at the palace, she was brought before the king. He looked at her sternly and said, "Your father boasts that you can spin straw into gold. Well, tonight you shall spin for me. I have set aside a room full of straw and a spinning wheel, and if by the morning the straw has not changed to gold, you shall surely die. For no one may make a fool of the king." Poor Anna was locked in the room and began to weep, for she knew that her father's boasting had brought her to this fate, and there was nothing that she could do to save herself. She was startled, therefore, to hear a voice. "Well now, my pretty, dry your tears, for I can take away your fears." And there stood beside her an ugly dwarf. Anna was too frightened even to scream. "Who are you? And where did you come from?" she whispered. "Never mind," said the dwarf. "Just know that I can save your life, but first you must give me something precious to you." At first, Anna could think of nothing of value she could give the dwarf. But then she said, "I have only a necklace of worthless beads, but it is precious to me, as it came from my grandmother, whom I loved dearly." "That will suffice," said the dwarf, putting it in his pouch. "Now rest while I set about my work." Anna fell asleep almost immediately, and when she awoke in the morning, the dwarf had gone, and the room was full of spun gold. When the king saw the gold, he was delighted, but he was also greedy, so he said that the following night she must stay in a larger room filled with straw, which she must spin into gold before she could leave. Anna was too frightened to protest, and that evening she wept bitterly, fearing that nothing could save her. But as she wept, she heard the dwarf's voice again, saying, "You've lived to see another night, but only I can help your plight." "Oh," cried Anna, "please help me as you did before." "What precious gift can you give me?" asked the dwarf. Desperately, Anna showed him a plain brass ring on her finger. "This simple ring given to me by my poor departed mother is all I have," she said. "Give it to me," said the dwarf. And no sooner had he taken it than Anna fell sound asleep again. The following morning, the king arrived and was amazed to find all the straw transformed into gold. But instead of giving Anna her freedom, he said, "I have just one more task for you. Tonight I shall fill the great hall with straw, and if you can spin that into gold, I shall reward you by making you queen. But if you fail..." Poor Anna. She looked around the great hall stacked with straw and feared that this time there was no hope. But the dwarf appeared again and said, "Your task is greater than before. You need my skills to spin the straw." "Oh," cried Anna, "can you really spin all this straw?" "Of course," growled the dwarf. "But what will you give me?" "Alas, I have nothing," said Anna. "What am I to do?" The dwarf looked at her and said, "When you are queen, the king will expect a son and heir. Promise to give me the baby, and I will help you tonight." "Yes, yes," said Anna hastily. "Whatever you wish, but please help me now." "Very well," said the dwarf. "Now close your eyes while I set about my work." When she awoke in the morning, to her amazement, the hall was full of gold. When the king arrived, he looked at the gold and smiled. "Make plans for a royal wedding," he commanded. "A girl with talents such as these is surely fit to be queen." The seasons passed, and within a year, Queen Anna gave birth to a beautiful boy, and there was great rejoicing throughout the land. One night, as the queen sat alone in the nursery with a child, cloud passed over the moon, and from a darkened corner of the room a voice said, "I saved your life with gold spun fine, and now your promised child is mine." The queen stared at the figure of the dwarf whom she had long ago forgotten. "Oh, but you cannot mean to take my baby from me," she cried. "Let me reward you in some other way." "Is not your child your most precious possession?" asked the dwarf. "Oh, yes." "Then this is what I must have," he snarled. But after a moment he cocked his head to one side and said, "I'll play with you a sporting game, if you can but divine my name. The child will then be yours to keep. If not, then my reward I'll reap." Then before the queen could answer, he had gone. All next day the queen brooded on names that might fit the dwarf, and in the evening she waited alone in her room for the dwarf to return. Sure enough, when the clouds covered the moon, the dwarf appeared as before and said, "You know the question is the same. Can you tell me what's my name?" The queen tried all the names she had gathered, like Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, then Peter, Paul, Patrick, but the dwarf just laughed and said, "When the moon comes into sight, I shall return tomorrow night." Then he disappeared again. The next day, the queen instructed her messengers, foresters, and huntsmen to search the land to discover the name of the dwarf. But at the end of the day, none had returned with any news. When the dwarf appeared again that night, she tried desperately to guess his name. Could it be Long Nose, Squint Eyes, Potbelly, or perhaps Dog Ears, Bandy Legs, or Flatfoot? She asked. But the dwarf merely laughed as before and chanted, "Tomorrow night is your last chance, or with your child away I'll dance." The queen was distraught with worry. Once again her servants were charged with scouring the country in search of the dwarf, and rewards were offered for any information. But it was not until late in the day that a breathless messenger arrived with a strange tale to tell. "Your Majesty," he said, "I had ridden hard across the length and the breadth of the kingdom without success, and was resting deep in the forest when I heard a strange sound nearby. I found my way to a clearing, and there I saw a strange creature dancing and singing." Go on," cried the queen urgently. "What did he sing?" "For you I spin the finest gold, and now your precious child I'll hold. You cannot hope to win the game, for Rumpelstiltskin is my name." "That must be the answer," cried the queen. "Go and rest now, and tomorrow you shall receive your reward." Later, when the dwarf appeared again, the queen was ready. The dwarf chanted, "You know the question is the same. Can you tell me what's my name?" The queen pretended not to know the true name and said, "Could it be Padawacky, or Pollylillo, or maybe Cockalory?" The dwarf laughed and was just about to snatch the baby from the cradle when the queen said, "Wait! Is it Rumpelstiltskin?" The dwarf was furious, and in his anger he stamped so hard he fell through the floor and perished in the moat deep below. The queen clasped her baby in her arms and vowed that he would grow up never to boast foolishly. And he never did. One bright summer's morning, a woodcutter set off from his house on the edge of the forest. In the house, a little girl watched her mother preparing food, which she packed carefully